Hey, today I'm not going to tell you about miracles of technology, not about superweapons of the future, not about secret labs in Silicon Valley. Today we're talking about an art they don't teach you at engineering schools, an art that was born in dark hangars under Tel Aviv, in the labs of Unit 8200, in workshops that looked more like scrapyards than innovation centers. The art of looking into someone else's guts, the art of building a new world out of someone else's screws, the art of reverse engineering. But in the Israeli version, this is not just a technique, it's a survival philosophy. Because when you can't buy a tank, you strip down the one you captured. When you can't buy a missile, you learn how it thinks. Today we'll show you what Israeli reverse engineering really looks like, and why this is not a story about copying. It's a story about how, when you don't have access, you build access to everything. Not everything that shines in Israel's defense industry was created from scratch. In reality, many of the biggest successes of Israel's military, tech, and aerospace sectors are not the result of pure, original innovation, but of mastery in copying. But it's not copying like in a textbook. It's something far more sophisticated. It's reverse engineering, the art of breaking down someone else's system into its smallest pieces and putting it back together again. Sometimes better, sometimes faster, sometimes without asking for permission, and sometimes without leaving fingerprints. To understand why Israel leaned so heavily on reverse engineering, you have to understand geopolitics. In the 1950s, 1960s, and 1970s, Israel was under multiple embargoes. It couldn't legally buy key military technologies, while at the same time it lived under constant threat of war. It operated under pressure of time, politics, and physical survival. In that environment, reverse engineering stopped being a choice and became a necessity. Israelis took apart captured Soviet rifles, smuggled tank parts, even fragments of missiles, just to understand how they worked. Then they built their own versions, officially different. In practice, very similar, but it wasn't just metal that was copied. It was ideas, systems, architectures, adapting foreign platforms, modernizing other people's designs, and finally, selling them on. Sometimes legally, sometimes at the edge of the law, and sometimes far beyond that edge. In this episode, we'll talk not only about the technical mechanisms, we'll show you the system that turned reverse engineering into part of Israel's technological DNA. From the legendary cases, like the cover fighter based on the French Mirage, to cyber tools that were decades ahead of their time. We'll talk about famous episodes, about secret Mossad operations, about stealing code in the world of intelligence, and about industrial piracy, which in another country would have ended in court, and here, in Israel, often ended, with a new contract from the Pentagon. We'll have comparisons to China, to the USSR, to the United States. We'll define where reverse engineering ends and espionage begins, where inspiration stops and copying starts, and who is copying Israel today. This will be a story about technology, but even more about mentality, about a nation that learned to think strategically where others move mechanically, about a state that, locked out of the shop, built its own master key, and about a question that keeps coming back in every serious analysis of Israel's technological success. Did Israel build its arsenal, or did it simply know exactly whose to quietly borrow? Strap in. We're about to start digging through other people's wires. Let's start with a story that sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but happened for real. 1966 Iraq. The Israeli Mossad, backed by the CIA, runs one of the boldest intelligence operations of the Cold War. The target? A Soviet MiG-21, one of the most advanced fighter jets of its era. The pilot, Munir Redfa, a Christian in the Iraqi Air Force, is persuaded to defect. He's promised safety for his family, a new life, money, and Redfa flies. He lands the jet in Haifa. The MiG-21 falls into the hands of Israeli engineers. The autopsy begins. Every piece, from the tiniest screw, through hydraulic lines, all the way to the communication wiring, goes under the microscope. This isn't just disassembly, it's a surgical post-mortem of a technology. The Americans, stunned. What had been a guarded secret for them now lies wide open on an Israeli workbench. Analyses, documentation, conclusions, all shared. But Israel isn't doing this out of loyalty. It's doing it because it gains access to the know-how that will let it build its own equivalent faster. That was a turning point. From that moment on, everyone knew, if you can take it apart, you can put it back together and improve it. France, initially Israel's key strategic partner, starts backing away. De Gaulle's policies shifting moods in Europe. In 1967, Israel suddenly loses access to further Mirage the 3 deliveries. But instead of crying about it, IAI, Israel Aircraft Industries, gets to work. In secret hangars under Tel Aviv, a new project is born, Kfir. The French Mirage is stripped down, mapped, digitized. But the Israelis go further. They replace the engine with an American J-79 from General Electric, reinforce the airframe, tweak the avionics, upgrade the weapons systems. The result? A jet that at first glance looks French, but inside is Israeli to the bone. Kfir is more than a clone. It's a hybrid. IAI puts it into service quickly and also exports it to Colombia, Ecuador, Sri Lanka, and even to the United States, where it flies as an enemy jet for U.S. Navy training under the designation F-21 Lion. It's a precedent. A country that doesn't traditionally build its own fighters exports its copies to global markets. Copying didn't stop at aircraft. Soviet Kalashnikovs, modified to Israeli specifications, surface-to-air missiles, adapted, radar systems, reprogrammed. Israel learned one thing. Every piece of enemy hardware is a potential library of data. And it wasn't just physical components. It was software, algorithms, control systems. Reverse engineering moved into the digital age. Israel didn't become a tech power because of its size, or its budget, or because it got all the right licenses. It became one because it was willing to do something other countries were embarrassed to admit: learn from other people's insides. How did Israel build its armored force out of other people's wrecks? A tank doesn't care where its steel comes from. It doesn't ask whether its engine is American, its turret French, and its fire control system Soviet. A tank is supposed to move, fire, and survive. In Israel, that principle was taken very literally. While the world looked at tank development through the lens of innovation, Israelis looked through the lens of availability. This was a country that couldn't afford to design its own tank line from scratch, but it had one priceless resource: captured wrecks. After the Six-Day War in 1967 and the Yom Kippur War in 1973, the IDF had hundreds of captured Syrian and Egyptian tanks, T-54s, T-55s, T-62s, all Soviet-made. They were modern machines, but damaged. A typical NATO staff officer would have sent them to the scrap heap or parked them in a museum, but not the IDF. In Israeli army workshops, a massive operation began, reverse engineering the T-55. Mechanics and engineers took these tanks apart, cataloged, analyzed, and then rebuilt them. The result was the Tiran project, Israeli versions of Soviet tanks, equipped with new radios, Israeli machine guns, modified turrets, and often new optics. Because the engines stayed the same, spare parts could be scavenged from other captured wrecks. There's nothing accidental about the name Tiran. The project was meant to show that Israel could not only fight with captured weapons, but turn them into a permanent part of its arsenal. But the real breakthrough came when Israel started buying American M48 and later M60 Patton tanks. What did it do? Of course, rebuilt them. That's how the Magach series was born: Israeli versions of American tanks with different armor, upgraded fire control systems, new reactive armor, and often different engines. The rebuilds went so far that some vehicles looked more like Frankenstein's monster than the original design. But they worked, and they won. A retired IDF colonel summed it up years later. A tank is a tool. If you can strengthen it with illegally sourced electronics and armor you ripped off a wreck in the Bekaa Valley, you do it. It's not about elegance, it's about effectiveness. Magashs fought in Lebanon, Gaza, and counter-terror operations. But the most interesting part? Many of them had a hybrid soul, a hull from the US systems from Germany, a turret from France, and fire control, Israeli. Designed locally, built using documentation that was found, captured, or obtained off the books, and eventually, the homegrown project, Merkava. Today considered one of the best tanks in the world. Look closely, though, and you'll see Merkava is also the product of decades of reverse engineering. It's the sum of everything they'd learned from other people's machines, put together into something new. And the process continues. Modern Israeli armored vehicles, like the Namer or Eitan, use components sourced from both West and East. There's no sentimentality, only performance. And what about international law? Well, Israel never signed up to many of the core agreements on military tech IP, and even if it did, in a situation of existential threat, no one is counting the origin of each bolt. This wasn't romantic. It was survival logic. Reverse engineering in armor wasn't just a technique. It was a philosophy. Take whatever you can, upgrade it, and keep moving. On that basis, Israel built one of the most resilient and adaptable armored forces on the planet. How did Israel seize control of the ether? Every war is fought in 3 dimensions: on land, in the air, and in the ether. The third one is the hardest to see. No trenches, no front lines, no tanks. But that's exactly where the most important battles of the 21st century take place. And Israel, a country surrounded by enemies, dependent on a technological edge, understood from the beginning, whoever controls the signal, controls reality. The beginnings were simple: captured Syrian and Egyptian hardware, Soviet radios, radar systems, antennas. They were sent to the workshops of Israel's technical units and signals intelligence, Amman and Unit 8200. There, they weren't treated like trophies. They were open books, every component taken apart, documented, analyzed. Often, full replicas were built from scratch, just to test reactions. But that was only step 1. Step 2 was going inside. Radar systems like the P-12 and P-18, captured in Egypt, were not only studied, they were dissected. Israeli drones such as the Scout or Searcher were trained to emit signals in ways that fooled these radars, changing flight altitude, approaching via blind spots, generating echoes identical to fighter jets. An officer from Unit 8200 later put it bluntly: "We weren't just interested in where the radar sees. We were interested in where it doesn't, and how to make it see what we want." In the 1980s came the breakthrough. During Operation Mole Cricket 19, Israel didn't just destroy the Syrian air defense network in the Bekaa Valley. It paralyzed it. Enemy detection, communication, and data link systems went blind and deaf. How? Through years of reverse engineering, frequency analysis, jamming trials, waveform simulations, wargaming reaction chains. This was no longer just about technology. It was about predicting human decisions by analyzing machine behavior. When Radar X responds like this, Pilot Y will react like that. In that space, Israel became a master. Reverse engineering evolved into full-blown cybernetic strategy. In the 1990s and 2000s, Israel was already a pioneer in electronic warfare. Rafael developed spice systems. Elbit built electronic warfare drones. Unit 8200 expanded its labs for digital and acoustic signal analysis. And most importantly, all of it was built on data from foreign systems. No line of code existed in a vacuum. Every technology passed through 3 filters: geopolitics, engineering, psychology. That's why Israeli firms could build tools capable of jamming entire aviation, comms, and satellite networks. That's why their tech was exported and used by the US, India, and even NATO states. At the same time, a civilian market was forming. Private companies using reverse engineering experience for non-military purposes. Airport anti-drone defense systems, based on analyzing Hezbollah's UAV systems. GPS jammers and spoofers, built on lessons from Iraq and Iran. This is no longer just reverse engineering. It's the Israeli model of adaptive supremacy. Observe, copy, improve, sell. Preferably before anyone else patents it. Israel built power over the ether. Power you can't see, but that every pilot, drone operator, and commander feels when their system suddenly stops responding. And then they know someone, somewhere, is listening. And Pegasus? If until now we were digging in screws and chunks of metal, now we're diving into lines of code. The 21st century isn't just about air, land, and ether. It's about data, systems, digital awareness. And here too, Israel was first. Pegasus. One word, thousands of headlines. A system created by the Israeli company NSO Group, capable of remotely taking over your phone, without your knowledge, without a click, without any warning. But Pegasus wasn't a miracle. It was a consequence, the result of decades spent collecting information, analyzing security protocols, taking operating systems apart piece by piece. How did Pegasus work? By exploiting vulnerabilities in systems and apps. It sent a hidden signal that triggered an installation process. Moments later, your mic, camera, SMS messages, emails, GPS data, all of it was in someone else's hands. But Pegasus wasn't just a lab product. It was the sum of hundreds of trial and error cycles, thousands of hours of source code analysis, intercepted and reverse-engineered protocols. And this brings us to the core. Israel's cyber sector is not cuddly startups sipping flat whites. It's an intelligence school. Unit 8200 isn't only a signals collection center, it's a hacker academy. Hundreds of recruits every year with top scores in math and computer science. Their first assignments? Breaking other people's systems down to the bones. In internal IDF documents, digital reverse engineering is described as structural simulation of complex enemy systems in controlled conditions. In plain language, we copy whatever we can and make it better. Pegasus is just the tip of the iceberg. Before it, there were other tools, less famous, just as effective. Software for breaking router security, tools to clone SIM cards, systems to hijack login sessions in real time. Some of them used in counter-terror ops, some in classic espionage, some never publicly acknowledged. In practice, when a new iOS update comes out, Israeli reverse engineering teams don't ask what's new. They ask, what can we break? Analysis happens in air-gapped labs with penetration tests, memory forensics, and sometimes social engineering of the user. The code matters, but the human matters just as much. Once a tool is ready, it goes to market. Officially sold only to governments, but we all know how the world works. Pegasus ended up in India, Mexico, Saudi Arabia. Was used against journalists, opposition figures, even presidents. Where is Israel in all this? Officially, not involved. NSO is a private company. But no one doubts that every line of code, every patent, every algorithm passes through the Israeli oversight system. Because code here isn't just a product, it's a weapon. In that sense, Pegasus is not a tool. It's a manifesto. A manifesto of digital supremacy. A message to the world. We don't have nuclear bombs on TikTok, but we do have something that can switch off your world before you even notice. How did Israel conquer the skies on other people's wings? The sky over the Middle East doesn't belong to whoever has the most planes. It belongs to whoever knows how to use them without gambling lives. Drones, unmanned aerial vehicles, have become the eyes and fist of modern armies. And Israel? Before it became a drone superpower, it was a copier, a master copier. The story of Israeli drones begins with a defeat, the Yom Kippur War. Egyptian and Syrian SAMs swatted dozens of Israeli jets out of the sky. Pilots died. Then the IDF General Staff made a decision. We need to see the battlefield from above, without losing people. The idea? Build something that will fly, come back, transmit imagery, and can be lost without a casualty report. But not from zero. Into the hands of Israeli engineers went civilian model planes from the US, French military reconnaissance drones, and the wrecks of Iranian UAVs captured by Kurds and handed to Mossad. From those elements, wings, flight control units, analog transmitters, they built Israel's first drone, The Scout. The Scout had electronics from Hong Kong, a camera from Japan, an engine from Canada, and a video link system inspired by NASA solutions. Put together, it was Israeli. It worked, it flew, it streamed live images, and it became the basis for a new doctrine: drone instead of pilot. In 1982, Scouts went into action in the Bekaa Valley. They cooperated with fighter jets, injected fake radar echoes, fed targeting data to jammers. The Syrians lost dozens of air defense positions. Israel, not a single pilot. That was a game changer, and proof that reverse engineering pays. Then everything sped up. Searcher, Heron, Hermes, Harop. New models didn't arise in a vacuum, but from data. Israeli engineers studied how American drones performed in Iraq. They watched Russian solutions. They bought civilian components and militarized them. Israelis could turn a $300 commercial GPS into a targeting system for a combat drone. By 2020, Israel was one of the world's leading exporters of combat UAVs. Clients: India, Azerbaijan, Vietnam, Germany, Mexico. Products: strike drones, reconnaissance drones, loitering munitions, often marketed as original designs, but in their DNA you could find French engines, Chinese chips, American data links, all filtered through Israeli combat logic. And again, as always, access was the key. If they captured a Russian Orlan, they tore it apart. If an American MQ-1 crashed and pieces could be examined, they learned from it. If Ukraine received the latest Turkish Bayraktar, they watched and took notes. Nothing goes to waste. Every drone is a textbook. You just need to know how to read it. Today, Israeli drones fly over Syria, Gaza, Ukraine, Africa, and NATO training grounds. But their roots? Not Silicon Valley. The Bekaa Valley. Labs built on abandoned wings. That's the Israeli art of flying, on other people's parts, in your own direction. If you still think reverse engineering is just screws and pieces of steel, now you know it isn't. It's a mentality, a way of looking at the world. Israel doesn't build everything from scratch, but what it does build works, and usually works better than the original. Fighter jets from other people's wrecks, tanks, hybrids, software from reverse-engineered foreign code, drones from models that crashed and never got back up. And the most important part? The belief, if you can take it apart, you can improve it. That's the core lesson of Israel's history of reverse engineering. It's not about being first, it's about being smarter. And now, if you like this story, hit subscribe, hit like. It's the signal that you want more stories like this.